we define clean air as air free of pathogens.
Microorganism perspective in the U, and also this is a very US-centric answer.
Antimicrobial resistance, sure they're moving into water as well.
Technologies that create another problem such as we've seen with antibiotic resistance.
What should we hear and what do you want to inspire us to go do next based on these challenges that you're raising?
We need more technology, not less.
Filtration can play a major role in the future of filtration on our planet. And I think there's so many challenges out there. There are so many opportunities.
WFI's strength comes from its instructors, its panelists, and incredible guest speakers. Each of you bring not only technical expertise, but a real-world insight from industry, academia, and research. The diversity of perspectives here reflects our global strength on our filtration community. On behalf of WFI, huge thank you for your leadership, your time, and commitment to advancing this very critical industry. Together for a cleaner, healthier, and more sustainable future.
Hello, and welcome to the Filtration Hour, presented by the World Filtration Institute. I'm Mike Malloy, Communications Director for the WFI, and I'll be your host for today's event. The World Filtration Institute is an education and advocacy group of professionals from all parts of the filtration community and all parts of the world. It comprises leaders from business, academia, journalism, and government, and includes materials, processes, products, and policies, along with the larger systems and social goods that rely on effective filtration. One key part of the WFI mission is our Certified Filtration and Separation Specialist Education Series, comprising more than 30 sessions throughout the year and led by some of the most knowledgeable professionals in the industry. These sessions provide comprehensive coverage of air and liquid filtration, from fundamentals to advanced technologies, and offer a great learning experience for people at every stage of their career. The sessions are offered live, online, or on demand, and this year's program began on March 10th and takes place every 2 weeks throughout the rest of the year. You can register on our website today. Another key program for the WFI is the Filtration Hour, where we assemble a group of industry experts to focus on an important topic that engages many parts of the global filtration community. And we invite anyone with an interest to participate in the discussion for free. Today, our topic is air quality governance, where we'll discuss air quality data and how we gather it, what it means to players at various levels of the filtration value chain and to the general public, and what it says about the larger systems that are supported by filtration and its impact on our future. The Filtration Hour is a free event, but more importantly, it's a free exchange of ideas, and we invite everyone to contribute to today's discussion with your ideas and questions. Today's session will be 90 minutes, with the first part focused on discussion points for the panelists and the second half focused on questions from the audience. We'll take a quick break at about the halfway point, and in the second half, we encourage all of you participating today to ask questions of the panelists by entering them into the Q&A on your Zoom menu, where I will compile and share them, or by raising your hand to be recognized if you're on the panel. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us for today's discussion on one of the most consequential challenges of our time, how we govern the air we breathe. As communities grapple with pollution, aging infrastructure, and rising expectations for healthier indoor environments, the role of effective air quality governance has never been more urgent. Our panel today brings together experts who understand this landscape from every angle: policy, engineering, filtration science, and public communication. We'll explore how advanced filtration technologies shape indoor air quality, where regulatory frameworks succeed or fall short, and how journalists and media professionals can help translate complex technical issues into clear, actionable understanding. By connecting science, policy, and public dialogue, our goal is to illuminate pathways towards consensus and empower diverse communities to make informed decisions that protect health and strengthen trust. Let's get started. Joining us today to discuss filtering the air quality governance are our session chair, Dr. Iyad Al-Attar. Dr. Al-Attar is one of the world's most influential voices in air filtration science, a mechanical engineer, global air quality consultant, and visiting academic fellow at Cranfield University, where he specializes in filtration performance for HVAC systems and land-based gas turbines. With more than 2 decades of industry leadership, he has served as Eurovent Middle East's first air filtration consultant and now acts as Eurovent's indoor air quality patron. Dr. Al-Attar holds engineering degrees from the University of Toronto, Kuwait University, and Loughborough University, and is advancing research at Oxford University on sustainable urban air quality. A prolific columnist and keynote speaker, his work shapes global thinking on filtration design, particle characterization, and the governance models needed to embed clean air into the built environment. Next up is Dr. Ciara Steele. Dr. Steele is an Irish medical doctor and co-founder of Clean Air Advocacy Ireland, where she has become one of the country's most visible champions for indoor air quality in schools and public spaces. She spent years educating students, teachers, and policymakers on the health and learning benefits of air filtration and ventilation, leading hands-on initiatives that have brought clean air technologies directly into classrooms. Her work blends clinical insight with community-level action, helping Ireland rethink how indoor environments shape public health. Today, she brings a frontline medical perspective to the future of air quality governance. Okay. Next, we have Peter Cantone. Peter is the founder of Smart Air Defense and a national advocate for improving air quality in America's schools. With more than 25 years of experience in school infrastructure, energy performance, and IEQ modernization, he's helped districts across the country rethink how buildings support student health and learning. His work spans innovative funding models, advanced IEQ assessments, and large-scale modernization strategies. A Pace University graduate and member of the Global Commission on Healthy Indoor Air, Peter brings a pragmatic, solutions-driven perspective to the future of clean, healthy learning environments. Next up, we have Simon Jones. Simon is a leading public communicator on indoor air quality in the built environment, best known as the creator and host of the Air Quality Matters podcast and YouTube channel. With more than 2 decades of conversations with scientists, engineers, and innovators, he's become a trusted translator of IAQ science for the public. His work demystifies ventilation, filtration, and building performance through accessible storytelling and hands-on testing. Simon's media platforms have helped shape public awareness of the real-world impacts of indoor air quality, making him a vital voice in the governance conversation. Sorry. Next up, we have Caryn Smith. So Caryn was Chief Content Officer and Publisher of International Filtration News and Indomedia, where she spent more than 30 years covering the technologies, trends, and global events shaping the filtrations and separations industry. Her reporting spans major conferences, emerging filtration science, and the business forces driving innovation across water, air, and industrial applications. Caryn's work has made her one of the most influential editorial voices in the sector, translating complex technical developments into accessible insights for industry and the public. Today, she brings a journalist clarity to how media can elevate public understanding of air quality governance. Next, we welcome Dr. Jason Hartke. Dr. Hartke is the Executive Vice President of the External Affairs at the International Wellbeing Institute, where he leads global advocacy to advance healthier buildings and communities. With more than 2 decades of experience spanning federal policy, nonprofit leadership, and sustainable building innovation, he previously served as president of the Alliance to Save Energy and led major energy efficiency initiatives at the U.S. Department of Energy and the U.S. Green Building Council. A former journalist and a PhD in public policy from George Mason University, he has shaped national conversations on healthy indoor air and building performance. Today, he brings unmatched policy depth to the intersection of IAQ and governance. And finally, we have Sotirios Papathanasiou. Sotirios is an internationally recognized indoor air quality expert and the leader of the Global Open Air Quality Standards Initiative, which aims to unify global benchmarks for clean indoor air. He's the author of 4 books on air pollution, a Well-Building Institute Air Advisor, and a prominent voice on the role of sensors, low-cost monitoring, and data transparency in public health. His work bridges science, policy, and public communication, helping communities understand and act on the realities of indoor air exposure. Today, he brings a global perspective on how standards and governance can reshape the future of indoor air quality. Welcome to all of you. And now let's get things started with a short video from Dr. Iyad Al-Attar.
As urbanization accelerates, effective air quality governance has become a paramount global health priority. But a dangerous gap exists between drafting and air quality legislation and on-the-ground implementation. How we turn complex environmental policies into actionable public knowledge.
As cities grow and industries accelerate, air quality governance has become a defining global health challenge. And too often, there's a wide gap between the policies we write and the enforcement people actually experience. Today, we're pleased to present a dynamic conversation chaired by Dr. Iyad Al-Attar on how journalism and the media can help close that gap. We'll explore how investigative reporting translates complex environmental science, how clear communication demystifies filtration standards, and how strong storytelling can drive accountability across sectors. If you care about clean air, credible standards, and public health impact, this hour is for you. Because when it comes to the air we breathe, it's not only about how we change and when, but when.
In the Filtration Hour, we don't just answer questions. We ask new questions.
Welcome to the Filtration Hour.
All right, very good. Well, let's get started. And joining us now to moderate the panel discussion in the first half of today's session is the Director of Marketing for WFI, Mitch McCreary. Mitch McCreary, take it away.
Yes. Good morning, everyone. How are you? I hope you're having a fabulous day or evening. Now, what I'd like to do is to start this session off with an opening statement from each one of our panelists here. And so let's start with Caryn. Do you have an opening statement here for us?
I do. Thank you to WFI for having me and for that wonderful introduction. So my perspective gets right to the point of media collaboration. But first, let's define media as a channel, platform, or technology, either print, online, or broadcast, used to communicate to a target audience. It's really that simple. As an executive who works across all media and publishing, as well as marketing and brand strategy, I have a unique vantage point. I've shaped brand narratives, and I've also crafted targeted messages that connect with real people in real time. What I see in the filtration industry is not a lack of innovation, it's a lack of translation. We are incredibly good at proving concepts. We publish the data, we validate the science, we explain the mechanisms, but too often we just stop there. We communicate in a way that serves mostly the scientific community, but the people who make purchasing decisions are often left out of the equation, as well as the policymakers taking regulatory actions. And often, most often, the general public whom filtration is meant to serve. There is a gap between proof and purpose. So when working with the media, they're really not looking for your product sheet. They want the story behind it. Editors want to hear from your company leadership or your innovators, not the marketing team, who by the way, do a great job. But in this context, the editors want a story, not a pitch. And most important to consider, what makes your story interesting to tell at all? I mean, what do you have to bring to the table for these editors? What gets read most is content that is relevant and compelling, not necessarily the most technical. The media is not just a distribution channel, it's a two-way relationship. It's a partnership. Editors are collaborators looking for meaningful content and timely content that serves their readers. So if the filtration industry truly wants to lead in public health and sustainability and innovation, we have to shift our thinking from product messaging to more story-driven communication, technical validation to real-world impact, and transactional outreach to relationship-based engagement. Because in my opinion, filtration is not an engineering conversation. It's a human one. One last point I'd like to make is the media, their responsibility is to serve their audience. They expect transparency when working with partners in storytelling. So they will ask you the hard questions. And I think that if the filtration industry looks at this as an opportunity to move the needle on advanced filtration applications, they will come out ahead. So don't be afraid to ask or answer the questions. Why are current systems not enough? Why are sustainable solutions the best way forward despite the high cost? And what are the ultimate health and wellness benefits? These are very open conversations that will ultimately increase the buy-in needed to proceed in your industry. Thank you.
Thanks, Caryn. And let's see, Peter, do you have an opening?
Yes. Thank you, Mitch. Hello, everyone, and thank you for having me here, Dr. Al-Attar, Dr. Sun, Mike, Mitch, discussing air quality governance. When we talk about indoor air quality, especially in public and institutional buildings, we tend to frame it as a technical challenge or a funding challenge, and it is both. But more fundamentally, it's a governance challenge. For decades, building owners, particularly schools, municipalities, and public agencies, have been asked to do something incredibly difficult: finance, design, operate, and maintain complex mechanical systems that directly impact human health, all within constrained budgets and rigid procurement frameworks. The result is what we see today: aging infrastructure, deferred maintenance, and indoor environments that too often fall short of the standards we know are necessary for health, performance, and resilience. But here's the shift that's beginning to happen and why this conversation matters. Private capital is no longer just a funding source. It has the ability to become an accountability partner. Instead of simply providing upfront dollars for equipment that a district or agency must then struggle to maintain, private capital, when structured correctly, can take long-term responsibility for system performance. That means not only delivering high-efficiency HVAC, filtration, and ventilation upgrades, but also ensuring those systems are continuously optimized, maintained, and accountable over time. This changes the model entirely. Air quality is no longer a one-time capital project. It becomes a managed outcome. And governance evolves from fragmented responsibility to aligned incentives, where the entity providing the capital is directly tied to the performance of the environment inside the building. That's the opportunity in front of us, to rethink not just how we pay for better air, but who is responsible for delivering it every single day. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Sotirios. Or Simon, next. Simon, do you have an opening statement?
I do, yes. Thank you. And I appreciate the invite. I hope you can hear me okay.
Yes, fine.
I wanted to start by looking and discussing and thinking about what a building is actually supposed to be. Historically, it was an evolutionary bargain. We built structures to keep the rain off, to keep the danger out, and to provide safe spaces for us to sleep and flourish. It is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. But somewhere along the way, we broke that deal. We became obsessed with how airtight and how energy efficient we could make that box, how cheaply we could stack it, how little we could spend on maintaining it. And we completely forgot the mammal living inside it. We turned our buildings often into biological traps. But the consequences of that broken deal are not shared equally. We are living through what I call an inequality of breath. On one side of the proverbial street, we have platinum certified corporate headquarters with $1 million filtration systems monitored by AI, protecting the high value mammals inside. On the other side of the proverbial street, we have a single mother in a social housing apartment breathing a toxic mix of roadside pollution, unventilated gas hobs, and black mold creeping up her child's bedroom wall. Let's not mince words. In the vast majority of our built environment, this is a social justice failure. We have created a system where your ability to breathe safe air is directly tied to the postcode and your income. And for decades, the industry's response has been institutional gaslighting, blaming tenants and users of buildings for lifestyle choices based on a building's systemic failure. This is exactly why journalism and media are so critical right now. We are suffering from a profound translation failure. We try to sell health using an impenetrable language of mechanical plant rooms, hiding behind minimum compliance limits that are basically the worst air allowed by law. Investigative journalism armed with the democratization of data that we're seeing coming from air quality sensors, is the ultimate disruptor. It strips away the technical theatre. It translates the science into undeniable public truth. It is the only way we're going to expose the broken chain, hold the supply chain to account, and finally treat indoor air quality not as a premium luxury, but as a fundamental human right. Thank you.
You're on mute, Mitch.
Oh, I'm sorry. Jason. Jason, do you have an opening statement?
I do indeed. Well, good morning. It's great to be here. I really want to thank WFI for hosting us today. This is a great session. My name is Jason Hartke. I lead external affairs and global advocacy at the International Well Building Institute. Here at IWBI, we're focused on advancing a global movement for healthy buildings, recognizing that the places where we spend our time have a profound impact on our health, our well-being, and our performance. A big part of our work is the Well Building Standard, which is designed to drive market leadership and accountability, helping organizations not just set goals, but actually implement evidence-based interventions and deliver measurable outcomes for people. Well is now being used in 130 countries and reaching nearly 6.5 billion square feet of real estate, which is a 12x increase in the last 5 years. And what I'd say that I find really striking right now is the momentum we're seeing. I know that I come off the heels of Simon's introduction, but I have a very different outlook. I think there is a rapidly growing recognition that health leadership isn't a cost center, it's a catalyst. It's a driver of performance, resilience, and long-term value. And I think we're starting to see kind of that hockey stick-like adoption in all sorts of aspects, whether it's education, awareness, policy adoption, all of those things. And so the opportunity before us is to build on that momentum, to continue to shift the messaging and the frame, as others have already highlighted, so that we think about healthy buildings and especially indoor air quality as essential infrastructure. But it also means continuing to change how we work together, bringing together public health, building science, policy, and the private sector to work in more coordinated ways. And from my vantage point, particularly as it relates to the policy and governance front, we are still very much at an early stage in terms of evolving the policy landscape. So this is an exciting time. We really do have the chance to create the conditions for scale. And I'm excited to talk about those, especially as it relates to, I think, some priority sectors like really great progress we've made in affordable housing, progress we've made in schools and other priority sectors and social housing. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I think if we get this right, we're not, as others have suggested, we're not just improving buildings, we're improving organizations, we're improving our communities, and of course, we're improving lives. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Jason. Next, Ciara.
Hi there. Thanks for having me. I'm co-founder of Clean Air Advocacy Ireland, formed in 2024, and we appreciate the invitation to join such experts in this discussion. We were formed in response to concerns raised by parents, healthcare workers, teachers, and patients that relevant information on the impact of air quality on health was being insufficiently communicated. We do have legislation in Ireland, but it is in the employment sector, the Health and Safety Authority Code of Practice for Indoor Air Quality. However, without active interest in this area, we really wouldn't know of its existence. Under this code, all employees are entitled to indoor air quality assessment, and all employers are obligated to provide good indoor air quality. However, there's no transparent evidence of routine monitoring, and there's very little implementation and regulation. So we want this code of practice to be extended, to have governance extended to all public buildings with mandatory and transparent monitoring. Such transparency would enable all building occupants to understand how air quality affects their health and to request corrective action where poor indoor air quality is identified. Children are particularly at risk. We know that because their lungs, brains, and immune systems are still developing. We know that poor indoor air quality can increase the risk of both non-communicable and infectious diseases affecting individuals at all stages of life, including in utero, as well as having population effects on health. Individuals who are already unwell can be disproportionately affected. The impacts of climate change, energy efficiency, and outdoor air quality are increasingly addressed through policy, but the impacts of indoor air quality remain underemphasized. Therefore, we advocate for national public health campaigns to highlight the importance of indoor air quality with specific focuses on vulnerable groups, equity, and inclusion. To educate the public, introduce mandated monitoring, supported regulation, and introduce the expansion and full implementation of our already existing statutory instruments. The reality is that in addition to outdoor air, indoor air quality is a key determinant of public health. The COVID-19 pandemic has unequivocally highlighted our vulnerabilities in this regard. Long COVID has reduced the effective workforce, and hence it is a productivity issue. The OECD forecasts costs amounting to billions of euro across Europe for decades to come. We believe that a health and all policy approach should explicitly integrate indoor air policy in all environmental and public health frameworks, should be aligned with energy efficiency legislation and retrofits, and we further propose that the importance of the issue should be justified with the Ministry for Indoor Air Quality, tasked with a full portfolio covering legislation, regulation, and fiscal oversight. Finally, we call for meaningful public engagement towards the co-creation of a shared understanding of the health impacts of indoor air quality, recognizing clean air as a human right and as a shared resource that requires regulation and stewardship for the benefits of all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Steele. And Sotirios.
Thank you, Mitch. Dear colleagues and partners, as we transition from the fundamental dialogue of our previous sessions in Air Quality Governance 3, we must shift our focus from what to how. In our earlier sessions, we established that clean air is a fundamental right, and others have shared the same message today. We recognize that the Filtration Hour as a critical nexus where public health, engineering, and public meet. However, a vision without a delivery mechanism is merely a hope. To move beyond rhetorical and turn out collaborative spirit into measurable challenge, we must anchor our efforts in open standards. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sotirios. Now, let's dive into some questions here. First, I have a question for Caryn. Caryn, what do reporters and editors look for in a story that will get published, and what audiences are being left out of the conversation about important facts?
Thanks, Mitch. That's a great question, and there's a lot to say about it, but I'll keep it short. Reporters and editors are really looking for a story that has value, not just information. They're looking for, is it timely? Is it relevant to their audience? What's the hook? And the hook can be either good or bad. They're okay with either. Does it solve a problem that people really care about? Does it connect to a larger audience or trend? And can the editor build a compelling narrative around it? And lastly, does it align with the media's mission or editorial calendar, which are a great resource for people to look at topics that they may want to run in the future? And most importantly, they want to know, can we talk to a real person or people about this topic within your organization or your effort? They want direct access to the experts. Those are the people that know the ins and outs. They want insight into the process. They want to go behind the scenes. They want to understand not just what worked, but maybe what didn't work and why that matters. Some companies fall short because they lead with the data and not the meaning of the data. The scientific paper is the how, but like a story explains why it matters. So that doesn't mean you can't write a scientific paper, but just make sure it has compelling applications that are real world or projections for the future that can be substantial and significant. But, you know, the audiences being left out are the ones we've just really mentioned a lot. You know, filtration is not equitable. It's not fair. But the end users and consumers are the one who really don't understand filtration at all. And they need education. Facility managers and operators who need application-based insight, not just theory. Those are the people making purchasing decisions, and they need compelling justification really to go up the chain to buy it. And they look to the industry to provide that. Public health communities and local decision makers who are dealing with significant consequences, such as natural disasters, water contamination, and air quality issues from industry toxins, and even younger professionals entering the industry who are not yet fluent in technical language. So we're overserving the scientific audience and we're underserving everybody else. And that's where I see the translation gap and where we could do better at communicating with the media.
Thank you, Caryn. Very, very to the point. Does anybody have a comment on that? Okay. So, Peter, what can we do to help fund more IEQ improvement projects, considering that we have a very aging infrastructure?
Mitch, I think Dr. Steele may wanted to comment on.
Oh, I'm sorry, Dr. Steele. I didn't see you. I'm sorry. I apologize.
Then we'll move to Peter then.
Yeah, thanks very much, Caryn. Your insights are so informative, and I do think research is important at the point to inform policy, but it's also really important, I think, to have research as we go along to understand the impact of interventions and whether they're beneficial, what we're doing is good, or whether there's sort of like unwarranted impacts. Like I think there's one study on the retrofits in Ireland recently, and after the mechanical heat, the energy efficiency retrofits, formaldehyde and radon were noted to be increased in those buildings. So I think it's important sort of to have a ongoing research as well. So have the research be dynamic, I think, as well. That's really the point I was trying to make. Thank you.
Thanks, Dr. Steele. Anyone else? Okay. Peter, what can we do about our aging infrastructure?
Well, I'm speaking specifically for the public school world in the U.S., but the principles can transcend different countries. But at the end of the day, when you look at the aging public school buildings in the U.S., you have infrastructure that, from a investor standpoint, is very appetizing, because you can go in and install LED lights with a very fast return on investment. You can install building envelopes with a very fast ROI. There's several different ways of investing in public schools that can help both the public school and the private capital. And so balancing that is something that governance needs to take place and encourage more private capital. But I add one major piece to private capital, and it was in part of my opening statement, is the accountability of their investments. And that is the fact that when you have a private capital that's investing in assets in a school, for example, and they are actually taking ownership of those assets over the term of the service contract, they have a vested interest to design the best equipment, to install the best equipment, because not just technically, but legally, if they're taking ownership, then they're liable for that maintenance and the guarantees over the service contract. That's a great thing for public schools. Public schools, just like municipal buildings, et cetera, their expertise lies in what they're doing. Academics, the superintendent or CEO of the school is fantastic with handling teachers and academics, and that's where their focus should be. What private capital has the ability to do is bring in expertise of engineers and maintenance and HVAC contractors, et cetera, to take that heavy lift off of the school and onto the experts, so that the facilities directors can focus on other things, landscaping, and obviously there's other things that have to be done as far as operating a school. But the heavy lifting is done by experts on the outside, and that's over the service term. And so what happens there, when you can put those things together in place, you have both private capital coming in, and you have a school that's has a long-term approach of a capital improvement project. It's not just the capital improvement project, and then now they have to worry about maintaining this. Because as we know, there's deferred maintenance for a reason. The schools don't prioritize deferred maintenance as it's not a high priority for schools. It's a very low priority. And so what we're doing is taking that off of their shoulders and bringing it to experts. Now, how do we pay for that? That's the question. How does this work? The seeds were already planted with energy performance contracts, right? That's the starting point. And I say that firmly, that's the starting point. That's not the end result, because we all know energy performance contracts don't really do well when it comes down to indoor air quality and IEQ measures, right? They're more focused on, let's put solar panels on, let's do some light stuff, and then let's walk away. But the aging infrastructure is still falling apart. We don't want that. What we want to do is expand on that. We want to widen the scope of the project, right? So now let's incorporate the renewables. Let's incorporate the building envelope and the HVAC controls, and let's replace some HVAC. Let's replace the boilers. Let's do what we're supposed to do. Call it modernization as an infrastructure, as a service, or construction as a service, whatever you want to call it. But the school is then purchasing a service that's basically purchasing the outcomes. That's what they should care about. They should care about the outcomes. What am I getting? Right? I don't have to worry about procuring all these state-of-the-art technologies that I'm not familiar with from a school standpoint. But what I do care about is making sure that my students are breathing in the best air possible, period. And how can you help me do that? And so what we have is the ability to offset a lot of the operating expenses of the capital being brought in by reducing the energy, reducing maintenance, because we're investing in better technologies and upgrading the infrastructure to help pay for most or all of the upgrades. Now, sometimes it's not a perfect world. So you may have something where a school may, for example, have a budget of, say, $10 million to do a project. But really, the project that they really need to do, if they want to do it the right way, right, is $20 million. Okay, so what does the school do? They have private capital put in the $20 million. And so that $20 million is focused on driving down the operating expenses for the school. And then maybe because the scope of the work is wider than just energy and maintenance, there's other stuff that's involved. Maybe the school may have to participate in $2 million so that it's cost neutral, right? So now all of a sudden, the school that had 10 million only has to put 2 million of its budget into it, where private capital came in and put the 20. So these are the fundamental pragmatic solutions that we're looking at. And when we talk about, where does indoor air quality fit in? That's easy. We all know there's so many great solutions out there. Sensors are automatic. That's standard operating procedure, but part of this. But we have to take that holistic approach. And when we do that and utilize these fundamental principles that are, as long as it's an aging building and falling apart, there's always ways for investors to go down and drive down that operating expense. We're in good shape.
Excellent. Mitch, let's move into the next question. I'll get Simon to handle the next question as we're falling a little bit behind schedule. So, Mitch?
Yes, that's fine. Simon, you've been very blunt about the industry hiding behind a thick set of acronyms for journalists and media professionals. What are the specific red flags in the BS meter that they should be looking for? And how do they cut through it?
Yeah, thanks. That's a great question. I get a sense you're leaning into my natural cynicism of the industry at this stage. Yeah, I mean, honestly, I think from a media perspective, such a large majority of our media around engineering comes out of trade magazines and organizations that are part of industry, and so much of that is advertorials and the engineering equivalent of greenwash. We need much more proper editorial content within our journalism. We need much more cynicism. We need to ask tougher questions, because there's a huge gap between what is said is possible and what we see out in the real world. And that doesn't just apply at the low end of the scale, that happens right across the spectrum of our built environment. And it requires a distinct amount of cynicism and investigative journalism to start unpacking some of these acronyms and bullshit that comes out of the industry about what products are capable of doing. So we can't keep turning up to buildings and finding a gap between what we thought was going to happen and what is happening in real life. At some point, and that's on all of us, we have to start asking tougher questions. And one of the things that we can really lean into is performance. Rather than what a product is and does it exist and does it look this color and this shape and fit with this design, what does it deliver in the real world, day by day, minute by minute? And if we start holding people accountable to real world performance of things, I think we can start to unpack some of this marketing wonkery that we see out in the industry. And all industry is susceptible to this. It's not just ventilation, but because ventilation and air quality often is invisible and imperceptible, and the risks are so far downstream with chronic illness and disease, we get away with it more than almost any other sector.
Okay, great. Thanks, Simon. Let's see, Jason, do you have a comment on that? I think we have a question from you for you. What does effective global coordination on indoor air quality look like, and how is the Global Commission on Healthy Indoor Air helping this happen?
And I'll answer that question and maybe bridge a little bit with Simon's points. When you look at the challenges and all the issues we're facing, it can be overwhelming and it can be cause for cynicism. And I think, we all want change faster, and change is hard and things can be messy. The buildings market, in each of our countries, the buildings market is huge and disparate. There's 90 billion plus square feet of real estate, commercial real estate in the United States, plus 120 million homes. In addition, you got many stakeholders who I think have primarily operated in a very siloed way. And lastly, but not least, progress can be incremental or uneven or worse, completely stagnant. So we have an opportunity, frankly, an obligation to shift that. And I truly believe that moments matter. And to me, we are experiencing this great convergence across countries, across leaders, stakeholders, and across prescriptions and solutions that is unprecedented. And I think it's very exciting. We came together for the first time at the United Nations last year during Climate Week. We were at the United Nations, the very place that embodies global coordination and collaboration. And that was a big, big deal. We stood up and we stood for the inherent truth that healthy indoor air is fundamental human right. It's also where we launched the Global Commission on Healthy Indoor Air. We pulled together 200 plus leaders from 40 countries, all aligned around a common agenda to underscore the urgency and build momentum for action. Overnight, it became the world's foremost global alliance of leaders united around healthy indoor air. And as we speak, we are using that platform to create a shared framework to catalyze not just global action, but local action. The global framework is organized around the pillars of market transformation. So everything from raising awareness to driving R&D, education and training, policy and advocacy, finance and resources, partnerships, of course. But what I'm really excited about is how this framework can also help enable national blueprints that can lead, that are going to be led by local organizations and can help their respective countries. So again, I'd end by just saying, change, like many things, is a journey. And I like to think of that old African proverb: if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And I think the folks who care about this issue are doing just that. We're coming together to make sure that we go far.
We're coming together, Dr. Jason. This is why we're here today, and this is why we're having this filtration hour. Let's move to the next question, Mitch. I think Dr. Steele is up next. Mitch?
Yes. Yes. Dr. Steele, what legislation governs indoor air quality in Ireland, and what are the barriers to that universal adoption?
Yeah, so like in Ireland, as I mentioned already, there is a HSA code of practice for indoor air quality, but that is siloed in sort of the employment environment. And again, it's a code of practice. It is legislated, but there's no implementation instruments, and there's no enforcement instruments. You can't be fined, your premises can't be closed, nothing like that. So these like that the power the governance of that could be expanded so that there's more ability to enforce those standards. So the other thing is that there's other standards involving indoor air quality, such as the tobacco law. That was a massive shift. But it was accepted because there was an obvious risk to secondhand smoke, and so there was an obvious risk not just to the individual, but to other people as well. So that is sort of the sort of the tack of trying to shift behavior change, that our actions are not only impacting ourselves but other people as well. That's so important to get that across, as to try and have a behavior shift and a behavior change. Tobacco smoke is easier because it's just so visible. Like what our challenge is the invisibility of the pollutants that we're trying to talk about, and the conceptualizing, like the ultrafine particles, that people find it hard to understand. So it's trying to make that visible. We're involved in the Peace Air project. There's community engagements with artistic programs and things like that, so that people can understand that conceptualization and how it affects individuals as well as population health. We know that PM 2.5 and nitrous dioxide have health impacts that are in shorter term as well as longer term, and it's trying to convey that to the public might also help to have a shift to engage with policy. The barriers to that, again, are just the lack of visibility, and we really want to change that by introducing mandated monitoring in public buildings, especially people who are most at risk, such as schools and hospitals. So that's a huge shift that we want to, not just in the private sector, not commercially, but just universally in all public buildings. There's very little regulation about private homes, and we spend a lot of our time at home. So there should be standards for private residents as well. So the barrier is people accepting that as a shift, that they can accept. But we have a thermostat on our wall at home measuring the temperature. We can just introduce indoor air quality monitoring along with that. I don't think that's such a big shift. I think indoor air chemistry, atmospheric chemistry, can be so transient at times that it's very difficult to monitor that on a continuous basis. And we know averaging out monitoring mightn't give a full picture. So that's a challenge, I suppose, that we have to overcome in translation as well. And I think aligning with the energy efficiency legislation is a key change, that we need to focus on the health impacts of indoor air quality rather than just energy efficiency, and have metrics focused on health outcomes rather than environmental quality or energy efficiency outcomes. And it's to try and understand through research, or what those health outcomes are, so that those can be standardized globally. So nuanced, like it's hard for policymakers to understand all the nuance of atmospheric chemistry indoors, of the health impacts. So it's understandable that the public finds it hard to take it on an individual level, rather than a commercial level where productivity is obviously increased. So yeah, I suppose they're the barriers that I see. And I suppose it's just talking and communicating and raising public awareness is where we're trying to work. Yeah, going forward.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Steele. Any other comments on that? Caryn?
Yeah, I had kind of a general comment over the whole, everybody did an amazing time I was just thinking as an editor, I could make a story out of everything everyone made points on. So the ultimate disruptor is a brilliant line, Simon. I just love that. That's what media does. They disrupt. And the filtration industry has to get used to the fact that disruption is good. Because guess what? If Ireland gets their code fixed and gets up to standards, if the schools get built with private equity, which is an amazing story, Peter, you should tell that to somebody. And, all these other things happen with well buildings. Everybody wins because this filtration company has more business. They get more out of it. So the more that these things are pushed forward in the media, the more opportunity filtration companies have to leverage it into dollars, into their bottom line. And I think they're afraid of the middle, which is the disruptive part, that they may get blamed, or that, and even the people that have the buildings will, have bad press. But at the end of the day, everybody needs fair and equitable filtration in every part of the country. The world is very small right now. Everybody has eyes on every part of the world. So people are used to having global messages put before them now. Whereas before it'd be like, what's going on in Ireland? Not really worried about that. Now Ireland can matter to the United States, can matter to Canada, can matter to everyone.
Right.
And we have to be able to push through this boundary, this invisible wall, this invisible thing that's not letting the filtration industry take that step.
Okay, thanks, Caryn. Sotirios, we have a question for you here as well. How can we move beyond fragmented silos toward a unified open standards?
Thank you for the question. First of all, I'm very happy about Ciara's answer to the previous question. I think she delivered a great answer there. And to answer my question, I will say that even inside the air quality industry, we see tremendous silos, which we'll address later on, as I want to also mention that there are silos everywhere, even in the government and legislations aspects. Many governments nowadays, they haven't decided who's responsible for indoor air quality. Throwing the ping pong ball to other departments, like from energy to health to environmental agencies, on who is going to manage this asset, because in many cases they are afraid, they do not know, or simply they believe it's not as important as we all collectively agree, and we believe it's very important. So once the governments decide to establish, I think, a body, a champion who is going to be responsible for indoor air quality, in order to have those legislations in every building, it doesn't matter if it is like an open public building or private residences, we will never move forward, in my opinion. And by providing those open standards that we have created, is because we would like to push them towards a direction that, there is some information out there available that you can use without having this barrier, economic barrier, let's say, which is the most common thing that you can find in general in industries out there. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we have barriers and silos inside our community of air quality, where the ventilation and filtration and air quality experts in general, remediation, etc., they try to tackle this problem in their own way without having conversations together. And again, at GoAccuse, we try to do exactly that, like bringing everybody together from different backgrounds, different countries, and have all those different opinions and expertise shared and taken into account in order to develop something useful for everybody out there, actually.
Excellent. Thanks, Sotirios. And we're running short on time here, so I'm going to ask, does anybody have any comments specific to anyone's question so far?
Yeah, if we can have a very quick comment. If not, we can move to the Q&A session. We can continue the conversation. Dr. Steele?
Dr. Steele.
Yeah, I was just thinking, Sotirios, like the global standards are so, necessary and essential, to have those standards for people to work towards. But I feel like, sometimes it feels overwhelming, like opening a can of worms. I sometimes think of it like when you want to take the kids to school, and then you see that you have to pick up things along the stairs while you're going to get your keys, and you realize that you've left something in the oven, and things like that. That it's just opening a can of worms. Where like in the Peace Air project that I'm working with, changing home combustion, and people are very aligned to their solid fuel burning. But partly it's because the electricity infrastructure isn't there. So, to maintain heat security and cooking security, and we have a lot of electricity outages during storms. So, there's a lot of, a bigger picture than just global standards, which is why all governmental departments need to work together and not have a sort of siloed attitude to even when global standards are introduced.
Thanks very much, Dr. Steele. All righty. See. Well, we have one more question here that we can probably fit in. And what will governments do to encourage private capital to invest into public buildings, Peter?
I think it goes back to the understanding of private capital being accountable for investments being made in public building, for example. If you go back to that quick example of the private capital coming in with 20 million and the school participating with 5 million, maybe that school doesn't have 5 million. Maybe the school has 500,000. Well, there's a lot of states right now that provide state aid to schools and municipal buildings, and maybe the state can come in with that few million. Right now, the states are coming in with that amount of money, except without private capital, when the state comes in with state aid, which many schools, many states, fortunately, do have that, it's not sustainable. And the reason why it's not sustainable goes back to what we talked about before, is that the superintendents in the schools do not prioritize maintenance. It's a very low. It's the first thing they cut when there's a budget cut. And so what happens is when the state is investing in the school and helping the school out, those funds, whatever capital improvement they've helped out with, usually 5, 6, 7 years down the road, are not doing well. Their deferred maintenance systems are falling apart. And so what private capital does for state aid is it allows the state aid to be protected, because when if they combine the two, if you're stacking state aid with private capital, now all of a sudden the private capital is coming up with the bulk of the funds, and the state aid is supporting it, and that's going to last. That equipment and stuff's going to last 15 to 20 years instead of 5, 6, 7 years, and the outcomes and the performance, as going back to Simon mentioning, outcomes and performance are more important. That's the more important thing. But if you don't have a system in place to make sure that all that is held accountable and who's exactly accountable for it, it's very difficult to kind of point the fingers when everybody's saying, they have different ideas and stuff. So, Jason, you want
to
jump in? Yeah.
Just real quick, I wanted to just make an adjacent point. There's a responsibility to kind of spur private investment, but there's also, there's an old line that former mayor used to tell me, let's stop like leaving opportunities on the table. And I think that the flip side of this is, how do we make sure that government investment in the building space already, which at least in the United States that I know well, you're talking about billions of dollars of financial investment, whether it's towards affordable housing, whether it's towards schools, whether it's federal incentives that go towards commercial energy efficiency and residential energy efficiency. You're talking about billions of dollars, and that's just scratching the surface of already public investment that's going into our buildings. How do we make sure that that public investment has a screen or a requirement or something that says, hey, make sure you're helping support health and you're not doing anything to hinder health? If you look at the Energy Performance in Buildings Directive in the EU, that's what they've done that. They've now said IAQ is on the table. It's got to be part of the mix. And that is a policy paradigm shift that we should all take note of. If government is making investment in buildings, period, it should have requirements related to health and IAQ. So, that's a huge opportunity for all of us in all of our countries to make sure that the public investment is prioritizing health.
Excellent point, Jason. 100% agree. And that absolutely has to be part of the equation. One of the things that I did was with the Boston was allowing the ASHRAE 241 to come, and we exceeded ASHRAE 241 in the Boston schools, which was pretty exciting. But the fact is that, yes, we can't just do all this and then not have really health results or a better IEQ period and be able to measure that, right? We want to do before and afters on all of this by third parties. So I'll leave that. That's what Tori says.
Okay.
All right.
All right. Thanks very much, Peter. Sotirios, I know you had a question there, but we're going to have to go to the Q&A here. So if you could just make it really, really short.
No, it's not a question, just a statement that EPB is a progress, but it's not perfection when it comes to indoor air quality. It's very limited at the moment, right? So maybe in the future, we will have something better.
Yeah, let's hope so.
You still have the envy of us over here at the United States where, we don't have a national energy policy or a national energy policy that integrates IAQ. So again, from my perspective, it's a step forward.
Absolutely.
Fair enough.
So right now I'm going to pass this off to Mike. Mike.
Yeah, okay, so we've got a bunch of questions from the audience here, and I'm going to combine a couple of these to get us started because we got two that really perfectly kind of bookend this conversation. And the first is, Sotirios, I'm going to stick with you. The first is, if funds were unlimited and political will was granted, what are the initial air quality projects that the panel would try to solve? And
I will
again,
begin.
This got to be quick. So that's open.
I will begin by saying that money is something that we have invented, but the health effects of air quality is something that we live with and we suffer. So by taking that into consideration, I will say that the best approach will be to, establish performance standards in every building that we spend time. It doesn't matter if this is an office, your private residency, hospitals, etc. We have to set the bar in order to be able to benchmark and see if we are doing a good, mediocre, or bad job when it comes to air quality in our health.
All right. So the kind of opposite question to that, and I'm going to go with you, Dr. Al-Attar. It says, as a filtration expert, how would you approach solving Delhi's severe air pollution, let's say any large city with air pollution problems, if you had unlimited access to filtration technology and power, but no control over public behavior or policy decisions, focusing purely on filtration media and systems?
It's a great question. I hope the person who has asked the question attended the air filtration course that WFI has hosted and I led. It's the choice between doing things better or doing, better things. Do we emit so much and then we go back and start recapturing what we just emitted? It's not a matter of, perfecting filtration solutions. I think we've got so much technology today to capture almost every single pollutant. We need to go back and question, why are we polluting so much? And then come up with the solution that is sustainable. I like what most of the panelists said. I have almost a quick comment on everyone, but I want to go to what Dr. Jason has said, that health as a catalyst. I think that means quite a bit, and then we cannot leave until the, disease has gotten control over the entire body, and then we start perfecting medicine. And medicine here is similar to filtration. It's not about what's ailing the filtration industry. I think it's what's really got to do with our pollution behavior. This is where the core problem is. We get everything to be polluted almost in a level that is irresponsible, and then we start sitting down and having coffee chats over how can we perfect standards and how can we perfect filtration solutions. So I think it's not a matter of how much access you have to filtration. It's how we are willing to change. Social change is an issue, and not just sitting back and relaxing, demanding more filtration solutions and more technologies in general, whether it's HVAC or the entire urban scale. So I would say, we go back and check how are we breaking our climate, polluting so much until we have a broken planet. Mike?
All right. Simon Jones, you had something to add?
Yeah, I wanted to kind of touch on both of those first questions with an answer, if I may. And that is, if I had unlimited budgets or I was looking at somewhere to start, without question for me, I'd start with the education system. And the reason I say that is for a number of reasons. When we create bad environments for children, we set a glass ceiling on the potential of their respiratory systems and cardiovascular systems. We are setting a precedent that they have to live with for the rest of their lives. Children in the education system are in an environment that they have little control over the investment of and the use of that space. They have to be there, and they don't have any impact on the kind of investment that goes into those spaces. So I think we have an obligation as a society to provide them with a safe place to go to school. And the other point that I'd make is, for many, many in society, and particularly in parts of the world that are less fortunate, a school is often the only place in a child's life they can go to that it may be safe or warm, or where they can get a square meal. So we have to treat those spaces as sacred spaces for our young, because for many in our society, that will be the only place they spend in a 24-hour period that actually nourishes their health and well-being. And at the moment, schools are one of the least invested in parts of our built environment. And that, if you were to measure a society by how it looks after its most vulnerable, by that measure, we are failing. So for me, schools is where I would start.
All right, great. Let's stick with the idea of schools. I know Ciara and Peter, you both talked about schools. But one of the questions here, what's the biggest gap between what policymakers think is happening in schools and what's really happening? And how can governance change to reflect that reality? Dr. Steele?
Oh, is that for me? Yeah. I mean, policy is now introducing like free meals in schools, to make the children healthier. Sometimes they're not even taken up. It's a good policy to have, but it doesn't universally improve health. Schools, people think that they go to school and they're safe, and that there is a standard of people assume that there is a standard of air quality there. The same as in your homes, because it's not visible that it's not. So that's why it's really important to have monitoring in schools and in all public places, so that the students, the teachers, everybody can see that the air quality is either good or not. I completely agree with Simon there that the trajectory of health, if it's attenuated in your younger years, you're stuck with that lower health outcomes for the rest of your life. So it's really, really important to focus on the health of younger people where their lungs are smaller. And I think it's the Chill study, wasn't it, in London, that found that children in the most polluted areas had the smallest lungs, and was the instigator of introducing the ultra-low emission zones there. So, there is an awareness that it's really important to focus on children. Schools are also hubs of community transmission of infection. So it's really important that all germs don't accumulate there, and that there is the capacity to have a community impact by clearing the air in schools on that level. So, the Boston Schools project, that is really transparent. There's projects in Latvia, France, where, air quality is live streamed. That's what we want and need, so that we can understand how our children are. Our children are obligated to be in school. In Ireland, you are referred to the social work department if you don't attend school. So children are obligated to be there in school. We have to make sure that environment is safe for them. And parents don't often think about it. So, it is the responsibility of government to introduce that safe air. There's another study, I think the Ingenious study, looked at the air quality at school, at home, on the commute. And it really was only at home where the families had personal agency over their exposures. So it's incumbent on policymakers to take on the responsibility of introducing clean air into the schools, into the playground, to have the green barriers, to make sure that they're doing everything in order for children to be breathing healthy air in those environments. So yeah, I think for me as well, parents feel that when they're handing their children over to school, they're being very well looked after, but air quality just isn't probably prominent in the thinking. But our understanding is increasing, and we need to introduce and act on our responsibilities. And I think schools also are the place to start.
All right, thanks very much, Dr. Hartke.
Sorry,
I say, Dr. Hartke. Let's go, and then I want to get to Peter, and then we'll come over to Simon. Jason?
Yeah, I want to agree with what's been said so far, and really, underscore what Simon said. I mean, schools are, we're failing and should be, a priority sector, and because of the vulnerability and everything else. But it's our promise to the future, all of our schools, wherever we are, and our children. And in the United States, we face an interesting situation, and I'm sure Peter will get to some of this too. But overall, we were part of the study that showed that in the U.S., America's schools face a $90 billion infrastructure investment gap every single year. Every single year, we're underinvesting in basic infrastructure needs to the tune of $90 billion. That's not just indoor air. This is a whole host of health threats. These are threats that, where kids are going to school and their roof might not work or their bathrooms don't work. Not to mention poor indoor air quality or poor water quality or horrible thermal comfort. So it's a big, massive issue, at least here in the United States. And, I think we need to really shift the conversation to what is a health first agenda when it comes to investing in school infrastructure, right? I mean, I've seen billions of dollars going into helping put solar panels on school roofs. That's great. But is that more important than having working bathrooms, working roofs, and improved indoor air quality? I don't think so. So, I think we really need to make sure that we are delivering on the promise of kind of what Dr. Steele was saying, that these are sanctuaries. We know that the health and well-being of those students, those teachers, those administrators is absolutely ironclad every time they step into the building. And that is absolutely not the case. They faced a whole host of other issues in the United States. And so we have to be able to balance that and find some new innovative ways to grapple with these challenges. And I think I'll pass the baton to Peter, because, how we bring in private sector investment is going to be a big part of that.
Yeah, great transition, because Peter, I'd like you to take that, but also talk about private capital accountability that you talked about before. And is that like taking a step towards selling clean air as a service, or is it you're really just talking about maintaining hardware over time? Please go ahead.
It could be both, absolutely. But as far as it's not just maintaining, but also maintaining the outcomes, right? So if we have certain standards of indoor air quality that we want to meet, then the technologies and state-of-the-art equipment and stuff that the private capital is going to bring in needs to meet that. And going back to what Simon said before, as far as, everybody can talk about all the different types of things, but the reality is we have to have actual outcomes that are measurable, that we could see, that everybody's transparent about. Going back to the transparency of Al Boston and all these other schools that really were at the forefront of making change. But going back to funding, as far as the $90 billion gap, because we talk about, is there a gap? Yeah, there's a huge gap. And a lot of people don't realize that there's a tremendous gap, and we're actually at a tipping point. And when we look at there's a federal bill that's going to try to get put out there of $130 billion in a couple months. On its own, it's not going to work. It's not, on knowing this administration, it's not going to work. It's not going to fly. However, if we said, all right, the federal government, we want you to put 130 billion in, but we're going to bring in 500 billion of private capital to do the heavy lifting. then the chances of that bill passing go up dramatically. And that's what we need to do. That's the fact of the matter. That's how we narrow that gap. And that's how we bring real technologies to public schools. So that's what I.
All right, Simon, you got more to add?
Yeah, and I know the reason I was trying to get in before Jason was I was going to tee Jason up for some of his colleagues as well. You know, it's no accident that why the young generation is so interested in sustainability. It's through successful campaigns like the Green Schools programs, where there's enormous potential to talk about the positives here with education. We capture young minds at the point that they're at school, at the potential in social sciences, health sciences, politics, engineering, chemistry, infrastructure, financing, you know, the lessons that can be learned for good infrastructure and science around air quality and ventilation in schools is enormous. And it is no accident that the young generation understands the challenges around sustainability better than any generation before it, is because of the investment that's been put into schools around things like Green Schools programs. So I think we should see this as an opportunity as well, that to answer many of the questions that are being discussed here about awareness and education and asking the difficult questions, we capture young minds at the right point, that they bring that home with them. You know, we've all been at the receiving end of enthusiastic children coming home telling you off while you're not recycling or doing something green, right? You know, we should be having that pressure brought to bear from us as parents by our kids coming home from school going, why is your fan not on in your bathroom, Dad? Why aren't you turning your cooker hood on when you're cooking? You know, we're not bringing that knowledge back with the kids. So I think there's huge opportunity here as well.
That's a great point. That's a great point. Caryn Smith, let's go to you. And I know you've got a question you want to add here. And I want to also ask you about storytelling, you know, and you said, I think this is totally true, we do a great job of talking to ourselves in the industry. You know, how do we elevate that conversation, expand it to so that Simon's kids are coming home and telling him to turn the fan on?
Well, that's a great question. I think it's been said, health and wellness are your entry points. And you add kids into it, it's a story, okay? Your kid's at risk. Most parents are sending their children to buildings that exist before that time was created. They were so old. They're not well lit, ventilated, and managed overall for an environment. And I think right now, mental health is a huge story. And you know, how you are in your environment affects your mental health. Okay. So there's another entry of health and wellness, but 78% to 84% of consumers globally in the US, globally and in the US, consider health and wellness as their top priority. And it's important for their daily lives, their families' daily lives, and it's driven by a desire for proactive health management. You know, disease is at an all-time high, stress is at an all-time high. People don't want that on their children. So if you take that kind of story to the media and use that as a catalyst, I love that word, for, you know, storytelling in communities. You can't do it, you know, you have to have target areas that are specific examples to use as a story. So if you're working on a project and you see, you know, that where that private equity could come in and you want to move that forward, take it to the news in that area or in that region. And if you add all of those things together and package it as a story that they can tell, that can bring emotions upon the people watching it, and the public gets behind it. And they're like, yeah, why doesn't that happen? Why isn't that happening in our community? It's all about, standards are not being upheld at this time. Why are we focusing on new standards? Let's focus a little bit on getting the standards that we do have being followed by these communities and start in the schools. That's a great story. And I think anyone can take a story to the media. You just pick up the phone, you say, hey, I have an interest in telling the story. Are you interested in telling it? And if they say no, you go to the next one. Someone will say yes, because right now storytelling is at an all-time high and everybody wants the next big story. And this is a big story. It's a huge, apparently a $90 billion deficit story. So, you have to be proactive. You can't sit back and wait for them to come to you. You pick up the phone. You're the experts. You know how to tell the story because you just told me all of your stories. All of those could be picked. You could pick up a phone, find a reporter that'll listen to you and tell it, and then get on camera. And then use that as a launching point for social media campaigns and PR campaigns, and then get in magazines. Use your trade outlets. Talk to, the people who are in your associations. These are all ways that you can bring these stories to the forefront, but it takes effort. Yeah, it takes time, effort, and it's not a real immediate payoff. So you have to be willing to invest, because once you get a media person on your side, they're going to come back to you again and say, what's the next big story? What's the next big story? I used to do that all the time. I do it all the time. Somebody brings me a good story. I'm like, what else do you have? I mean, that's how I started. That's how I met Iyad. He brought a story to me, and boom, he's like in every issue. So at the end of the day, you have to be willing to do the work, because it is important. And unless you have the public behind it, a lot of times these initiatives won't go very far, because you're talking to the choir. We're talking right now to the choir. Let's get these messages beyond this webinar, beyond each other, and to the people that can make a difference, which is the general public.
All right, thanks very much. Simon Jones, you're also in the storytelling business, and I also want to congratulate this panel of experts on only referring to ASHRAE once in the first hour and 15 minutes when we're actually trying to reach a wider audience. So well done. But Simon, what else do we need to do to elevate that conversation, get up to more people, other than, aligning it with mental health issues, aligning it with children's issues, aligning it with social justice? What else?
Well, I think everything that you've said there and above, it's about thinking outside of our silos. We get very comfortable talking within our own echo chambers, and the challenge to all of us is to think about the complete value chain of the buildings that we're selling into, that we're working within those environments. Who are we not talking to? And it's an old marketing term, but we really need to do better at understanding personas, really start to work at understanding the people that this matters to. Often we pay that lip service, and whenever you ask a sales team or a marketing team, have you done the persona work? Oh yeah, and Derek's dealt with a lot of those customers. He's done a persona for this person. No, I actually want to see you go out and talk to real people and really understand what matters to them, what stories matter to them, what resonates for them, what are the fights they're having, why do these things fail? And we get too comfortable with the technical detail, and we don't listen to the stories out there in the real world enough. So it's a task for all of us, is to just be better listeners, really, and that's not within our own echo chamber, that's outside of it. This stuff needs to pass the mother-in-law test. If I can't talk about this to my mother-in-law, then I'm probably overcomplicating it.
All right. Dr. Hartke, I've got a question for you. We need a short answer on a broad question here, but you'd mentioned that the clean air is becoming a catalyst rather than a cost center. And just thinking about, with a housing cycle of something like 50 to 100 years in most places, doesn't that just expand the inequality of clean air that Simon talked about? Or how do we make that more accessible and universal for everyone? We're only replacing 1 to 2% of that housing stock on an annual basis.
Well, that's a good question. I mean, I think on the private sector side, you have to get to demand, and to get to demand, you have to get to awareness, and people have to ask for it and say, hey, we are prioritizing in our own new house, or where we decide to go rent a house or an apartment, we are asking for these types of things. And that does change the market. I mean, I've heard from, real estate agents that say, hey, when people ask for it, we're able to then go back and say, hey, you got to do these things. On the affordable housing side, this is something that, many people don't know. And in the United States, there's a program here called Green Communities. It's essentially a LEED type program that was born out of this group called Enterprise Community Partners, that was started 20 years ago and has influenced hundreds of thousands of affordable housing units. 5 years ago, we partnered with them to essentially integrate as much of WELL as we possibly could into their program. And that program now does a dual certification for the Green Communities program and well, and it hits the entire affordable housing market. Green communities are required in or incentivized in almost 40 state housing authorities. So there's opportunities like that to do sector approaches and strategies that can have almost immediate impact. And all of a sudden you have this Green Communities program, which was the proxy for leadership in affordable housing, again, embraced by the market. And 5 years ago, we were able to come up with this partnership to infuse those health interventions overnight and then reap the rewards in affordable housing projects. So I think you need to continue to do things like that. In the short time I have, that's where I'll end.
Okay. Well, thanks very much. And we're getting towards the end of our time here, and we do want to leave time for the closing statements for everyone. Sotirios, Papathanasiou, I'll have you start with closing statements. Anything to add to that previous comment about affordable housing and accessibility for clean air for all?
Right. So this is what we're trying to do, right? Like creating less barrier for people in order to invest in a healthier lifestyle with the number one thing that we need in our lives, with our buildings, right? In order to protect ourselves from various elements, but also from pollution, especially when we're talking now climate change and how things changing and producing more air pollution from the outside space. How we can protect now people that they are, closing themselves inside the building from that specific area, from that specific problem, sorry. So we establish standards, we establish legislations by different governments out there, but we are also trying to work with different bodies and experts from different areas in order to help them understand what they need to do. For example, recently at GoKias, we were being approached by a huge association of construction builders, people that you will think they do not know anything about air quality, but they do know, and they want to build buildings in the US specifically with the highest possible standards when it comes to health protection for the occupants of those specific buildings, right? So us collaborating with them, it's a huge win, let's say. So open standards represent the essential implementing infrastructure of our mission. There are the common language that help us benchmark safe buildings across the world. My deepest thanks to Mike, Mitch, Dr. Iyad, and Dr. Christina, and the General World Filtration Institute for their honor to being selected for this exceptional panel.
Thank you very much, Sotirios. Dr. Ciara Steele, you're up next.
Thank you very much for asking me to speak. It's lovely to hear all the panelists and their really interesting, insightful comments. I think that we need increased governance. We need expansion of the current instruments. We need governments to take on regulation and performance standards, globalized standards for indoor air quality everywhere. I think it's true that we need to capture the imagination of children because they will bring sustainability forward. We need to have a holistic system approach to indoor air quality, not just at point of entry performance, and public-private partnership in order to bring all of these projects forward in time.
All right, thanks very much. Dr. Jason Hartke, you're up.
Let me come off mute here. I want to juxtapose my final point with an important contextual point. Healthy buildings represent an unprecedented public health opportunity and an unprecedented global economic opportunity. The McKinsey Health Institute conducted a study last year that showed investing in holistic employee health could generate nearly $12 trillion in global economic value. So in that context, my final point is this. I think this is consistent with everybody. This era of realizing true transparency, i.e. making the invisible visible, could be the greatest and most cathartic accelerant we see drive change in our generation. What gets measured gets managed, and if we can get to this era of transparency, we can drive awareness, spur solutions, and unlock accountability.
All right, thanks very much. Caryn Smith, you're next.
Okay. So the industry has the expertise, but it's now time to really leverage the media to turn that expertise into momentum, which was mentioned before. I think Jason said that. we have to tie our messaging with things that people care about: health, safety, cost, quality of life, and disease prevention. Those are what is being reported on most often right now. And the Gen Z and millennials, who are the big spenders right now in our economy, are the ones that will pay for it because they are behind that 100%. And if you can leverage that now, you can, as they age, they will get used to having better filtration options and get behind these initiatives that are changing buildings and the way we take in air. We have to get to the point where we close the gap of what's happening here and what the people know about. It's a working relationship with the media. They're not a megaphone. They're not going to champion your perfect message, but they love the dialogue, and we have to tell better stories. We have to serve the reader, who is the public, and we have to build these relationships now, because if we don't, they're going to come in and tell the stories that we don't want them to tell, and they'll spin it in a way that is harmful for the industry, because we are, our air quality is suffering. And I really think that if we take the lead now, we will have control of the narrative and we'll be able to have these things funded properly.
All right. Thanks very much, Caryn. Simon Jones, you're next.
Yeah, thanks. Just a couple of very small points to end on. I think, one of the advantages we have with air quality and filtration and the built environment in general is we have many of the answers. This isn't, we're not looking into a void of science that we can't come up with a way of, absorbing enough CO2 to stop climate change. This stuff is fixable now. The levers that we have at our disposal now solve many of these problems. So we should all be encouraged by that. This is not an unsolvable problem. And the last point that I make is that we mustn't forget the global south in these conversations. If we don't take all voices into the equation here, we miss a huge opportunity to reduce the suffering and impacts of air quality on a vast proportion of the global south. So really important in these conversations that we try much harder to take into account the voices from the global south.
Yeah, great point, Simon. I think queued us up for another filtration hour with that comment right there. So definitely something we need to work on. The final word here from Peter Cantone. Peter.
Thank you, Mike. I want to just bring us back to a simple but critical idea that air quality is not a project, it's a responsibility. For too long, we've treated indoor air quality as something we invest in once and then hope it performs over time. But hope is not a strategy, especially when we're talking about the health and performance and well-being of people inside these buildings every day. The opportunity in front of us is to fundamentally rethink that model. When private capital steps in, not just to fund improvements, but to take ownership of outcomes, to ensure systems are maintained, optimized, and accountable over the long term, we move from reactive management to true governance. And that's the shift that matters. Because better air isn't just about better equipment. It's about aligning responsibility with performance. If we get that right, we don't just upgrade buildings. We create healthier environments at scale, sustainably, and without placing an impossible burden on the institutions that rely on them. Thank you.
All right. Thanks very much, Peter. And thanks to all our panelists who joined us today for a great dialogue on a really important topic. Also like to thank Dr. Christine Sun and Camilo Gomez from WFI for helping to organize, and WFI Marketing Director Mitch McCreary for moderating earlier in the program. I also want to invite everyone for our next WFI course on air filter design next week on April 14th from 8 a.m. To 10 a.m. Eastern Time with Dr. Iyad Al-Attar as our primary instructor. And now I'd like to pass it back to Dr. Iyad Al-Attar for a couple of final statements before we close today. Iyad.
Thank you, Mike and Mitch, for navigating through the bright minds of our panel today: Caryn, Peter, Simon, Dr. Jason, Dr. Steele, and Sotirios. What a phenomenal session today, from powerful opening statements to an amazing and insightful closing statements. We have to decide, though, whether we want to continue to focus on doing things better versus doing better things. The challenge before all of us is how to transform all the knowledge and concrete steps discussed today into a reality so that our children and their children can dream of a bright future worth fighting for. Buildings fit for living, cities fit for dwelling, and a built environment fit for thriving and filled with clean air. Because when it comes to the air we breathe, it's not about how we change and when, but when. Thank you for the audience and for the World Filtration Institute for having this amazing session today. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been Filtration Hour.